Anything you do for the first time is uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't feel nice, but if we want to go beyond in life, we need to get out of our comfort zone. We often have the idea that happiness is, I'm so happy right now. But actually building long-term sustainable happiness includes uncomfortable emotions. Something that I would really like to explore as the next first would be a film adaptation of Finding Rhythm. So why do people seem happier in Latin America than in countries where we do have safety and we have low corruption? Dance is more powerful in combating depression than any other form of exercise.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Many Firsts, the podcast where we explore the power of first-time experiences and share transformative and inspirational moments in our lives. I'm your host, Regula Fischer, and I'm super excited to be here today, live in the studio with Aliénor Salmon. Welcome, Aliénor.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
We're so glad you're here and found the place well, obviously. How has your day been so far?
Actually, this is a day that is quite improvised. There are many things that I wasn't expecting that would happen today. But I think that as we're learning through your podcast, doing things for the first time is actually good for us.
That's interesting. I think we should dive into that. Let me just first say a few things about you so that the audience has a little bit of an understanding where you're coming from. So you're a French and British author, researcher, and a happiness consultant who left a career with the UN, the United Nations, to get on your own journey of, self-discovery, I would say, which includes dance. Dance is the big theme. It's the thing you felt you wanted to do if you could do anything you wanted to. And that took you also on a global journey, almost in that sense, where you would learn to dance in different places over the world and document that. And you did that in a book also called Finding Rhythm that is now available in all major book retailers, And you also founded Bailando Journey, which I'm sure we can also talk about. So you also support people on their journeys when it is about, finding more joy in their lives or living lives that are filled with authentic connection. So you're saying first steps are important. And I think that's also a tagline you have for yourself and your business. Let's dive into these first steps and maybe start with today. Any lessons that you learned precisely today or that you connect with your story? So today I'm basically pitching my School of Happiness, which is another big project I have, which aims to make the science of happiness accessible to all. But the thing is, I've never actually pitched it before. So this is going to be the first time. And I'm celebrating you.
I found out, I think, last night. So I literally had a card on my way here where I'm just reading the pitch and I'll go and give it immediately after this podcast. So the lesson I learned from that is, yes, it's uncomfortable. Anything you do for the first time is uncomfortable, but we don't grow. Growth is always an uncomfortable feeling. If you think of a balloon expanding, it doesn't feel nice. But if we want to go beyond in life, we need to get out of our comfort zone and we need to experience that growth. And then once we get to the other side, it's very rewarding.
As we're talking happiness also with you, definitely we have to, right? And it's such a big topic, I guess, for everyone. I mean, what are we living for? I would assume it's happiness, but you are really into research and science with that. So maybe there's some learnings that we can, or insights that we get from you today that may surprise us. But why is it that we want to grow? Is that really what brings us happiness? Is it the discomfort that brings us happiness?
So first of all, a disclaimer that happiness includes uncomfortable emotions.
Wow.
And it's not just about being happy in the moment. Happiness is not about jumping for joy. It's about building a life that is rich in meaning and purpose and that allows us to be our authentic self. So the definition that I go by goes all the way back to Aristotle. For me, he is the original life coach of all time. And it's the eudaimonic approach, which is kind of more of a long-term game. We're building happiness as a form of prevention of mental health conditions. And we're also building resilience. So in that sense, happiness is something that we can practice and that we can build on a daily basis in many small ways to become stronger and to thrive.
So you're saying because we want happiness in life, we're actually, while kind of pursuing it, we're building resilience. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is we often have the idea that happiness is I'm so happy right now, but actually building long-term sustainable happiness includes uncomfortable emotions and difficult moments. What I see right now in society, for instance, is people avoiding any discomfort, whether it's through numbing, scrolling, alcohol, shopping, you name it. There are many different examples. Distracting yourself rather than facing yourself sometimes. It's very difficult to sit with yourself with difficult emotions. But long-term sustainable happiness is about training yourself to be able to make it through challenging times.
And if we bring in now dancing also, because this is so specific to your transformational experience in that sense, where does the discomfort come in? I mean, I could imagine that learning a new style is maybe not comfortable, but then at the same time, if we're not professional dancers, it can probably still be playful, right? But where did that discomfort happen for you while you were on that journey of exploring dance and dance styles?
Wow. So I think I can give you a great scene just to picture in your mind in terms of discomfort. I danced on stage for the first time in front of over 1,000 people in New York, wearing nothing more than a bodysuit and fishnet stockings. I had no idea that this was a performance and boot camp for semi-professionals, and I had signed up as a complete beginner.
Wow.
Now, the thing is, I tend to not give up on things. I like to finish things. Sometimes even to my own detriment. I still have scars on my feet from that boot camp. But it was uncomfortable. I felt uncomfortable wearing practically nothing. I felt uncomfortable being with people who were a much higher level than me. I felt uncomfortable that I simply couldn't grasp the routine as fast as everyone else. It was, I think, a 6 or 8 hour boot camp, and I had to put the same amount of hours in rehearsal just to be able to do the performance. But the point is that I did do it. And what's more, some of the professional dancers in this group actually took time to help me outside of the boot camp to prepare for that performance, which really shows a lot about generosity and wanting to help others. The thing with dance is it's extremely uncomfortable. Of course, there's a lightness and there's a joy if you just bounce around your living room to your favorite song. But learning how to learn a new dance style as a complete beginner, as I was at 30 years old, is a different story. You may have to do the same step over and over and over again. I remember there was one step in the national dance of Mexico, the Jarabe Tapatío. I just couldn't do it. I think I did it 1,000 times until I finally got the step right. And there was no way that I could control it. That's another thing. We think we can control everything in life, but actually it's just effort, time, effort, practice. And that's quite uncomfortable, especially these days when we're surrounded by cheap dopamine and we want everything right away. Putting time and effort into something, it's actually amazing for our brain. So yeah, the discomfort is also in being seen. What I find is really powerful about dance is it helps people overcome shame. If you ask people to get up and dance in front of everyone in a room, they'd probably just die or be like, oh no, don't ask me to do that. But I remember before I embarked on this journey, I was living in Bangkok, Thailand at the time, and I was at a dinner. And there was a woman, a grandmother actually from the Dominican Republic, which is one of the countries I went to dance on my journey. She got up in the middle of the dinner because they played a song she liked. She just started dancing. And I remember looking at her and I was like, that is what I want for myself. That is how I want to age. That is who I want to be. I want to get up in the middle of a room and dance without a care for what anyone thinks about me.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. So that's what sparked it. Huh? I was wondering why dance, because I assumed that you would not have been exposed to dance much as a dancer yourself before you went on that journey, or did you have exposure to it?
So I danced ballet as a child.
Oh, you did.
But I was actually kicked out of my ballet school for being too round and too rebellious. Our teacher wanted us to become the next little swans, and I just wanted to dance because I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So it was something that I'd never really explored. I'd always had an interest in Latin dance. I learned Spanish as a teenager, very young, at 14 years old. So I had this attraction to the music, to the style, but I'd never actually taken classes until this journey.
So it was thanks to that woman. If she knew, sometimes it's people that we need, that spark this thing in us, that they may never know that this is how they inspired us, but then you can take it forward, right? Now you are inspiring others with your journey. And what you mentioned about being seen when you dance, that's very, very interesting. I mean, there's different aspects, I would say. There's performing on a stage, dancing on a stage, where people are really sitting there paying to see something or see people dance. But then there's the more casual dancing, or even, as you said, in one's own living room, right? We could dance. So what part does dance play today in your life after that whole trip and then writing a book about it? Do you just do it for yourself? Do you go to places where you do it with others? Do you perform? Is there a mix of it? What is it for you?
So without a doubt, dance is the best investment you can make for your physical, mental, emotional, and even spiritual health. There's more and more research coming out. Just recently, there was a study that came out showing that dance is more powerful in combating depression than any other form of exercise or activity. I think they also included some others. There's also a study that shows that partner dancing is the most effective activity to prevent Alzheimer's and dementia, which is something that we are going to see becoming a huge challenge for society in the future. So my grandmother, actually, she passed away this year at 98, but she always kept her mind very sharp, and she danced until her feet or her legs would let her, until probably her early 80s. And that's what I want to do, because when you dance with a partner, the science behind this is there are so many amazing things that happen. And I recently took a course with neuroscience of dance where I learned so many incredible things. So first of all, when we partner dance, we don't know what the other person necessarily wants us to do. So we're making so many rapid fire decisions every minute. That means that we create new connections between neurons called synapses. So we're creating new synapses and basically increasing neuroplasticity as we dance with a partner. At the same time, we're also really improving our mobility, so it can protect us in preventing a fall, for example. It's another reason why dance is so good for longevity and for health. Also, when you dance with someone, let's say you're at a salsa night or a tango night, Latin dance is really my area. You have to fully accept someone else for that song. They may be from any background, any age, and there's something so incredibly human about it. And right now, one of our biggest problems in society is the loneliness epidemic, or a lack of authentic connection. And the connections that I have felt with people I've danced with, it's not everyone that I dance with, but I feel an incredible sense of humanity when I dance with someone, because I feel that for the time of that song, I'm looking into their eyes, I'm holding their hands, and we're synchronizing to the same song. So I feel more connected to myself, to my dance partner, and to the music or the world, because it's kind of a connecting element.
That's so beautiful and so kind of relevant, especially in today's world, as you say, right? And I would imagine, but you're the expert, that historically probably communities would have danced more. I don't know. Is that, can we say that? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if we look at any communal gathering that we've had in different cultures, usually it involves some sort of dance.
Yeah.
And something that I find very interesting about Latin America in particular is that it's a region that prioritizes communal events and community gatherings. They put a strong emphasis on social connection. So what's really interesting here is in many global indexes on happiness, Latin American countries are usually not in the top 10. Number one has been Finland for at least the last few years.
True.
Now, there's a researcher called Mariano Rojas, an academic actually, who endorsed my book. I wanted him to check that it was relevant to Latin America. And he wrote a chapter called The Latin Exception. And in that chapter, it was a chapter from the World Happiness Report, actually, from years ago. And I find that this conclusion is really interesting. He said, on paper, Latin American countries do not have the criteria that we would highly rank for happiness, such as faith in institutions, stable governments, safety, crime, and all these things. So why do people seem happier in Latin America than in countries where we do have safety and we have low corruption? And the answer was strong social foundations.
Wow.
A huge priority on friends, on family, on community, and on communal gatherings. And what happens in a communal gathering in Latin America? People dance.
Yes, that's so true. Wow, this is so eye-opening. And how research is kind of influenced, or statistics, by the eyes that are looking at it or trying, kind of generating the results in the end. And interesting also that you were a researcher on the happiness topic, but now you seem to be finding out like even deeper layers of the whole theme, right? Than when you were doing your job.
Absolutely. It's actually, sometimes I think about it, I've been studying happiness for 10 years now. And there are things that I've been learning even in just the last couple of years that I didn't know before. My focus at the UN was on reforming education systems. So I was really looking at happiness in policy to address future societal problems. I started going into positive psychology, but also looking at positive education. But in terms of neuroscience, behavioral science, and applied philosophy, that's more recent, something that I've been looking into through my through various projects. But that's a very interesting observation that maybe we have access to more information now than we did 10 years ago. The research on dance and happiness, I think, is still fairly new. There's more and more. I would say with COVID, a lot more information has come out around mental health, well-being, and happiness. Yeah,
true. And also the theme of, or the topics of loneliness and community. And you said, as we speak community, you have founded a school, the School of Happiness. Is there something, I'm aware there's the pitch, but is there something you can share about that? And is it also about community in a way?
Yeah, so we're actually just launching the kind of School of Happiness 2.0. But the idea started 2 years ago, October 2022. And we started with 20 founding members with one big mission to make the science.
22,
so many 20, twos everywhere.
2 years, yes.
Our mission was very clear: to make the science of happiness accessible to all. This was something that had struck me from my work, that actually happiness is something that can be taught and it can be learned. Now, in terms of policy research, getting an education system to actually fully adopt that is going to take a long time. But if we already know how to teach it and know that it can be learned now, then why aren't we doing it now? So that's how the idea was born. So we started off with monthly live workshops. We had a different theme every month, which was usually based around a strength from the VIA strengths framework, which is the kind of the reference that I use for the actual practice and learning of happiness, which is made up of 24 character strengths. So these range from love to kindness to perseverance, teamwork, leadership. They also have a free survey. I recommend that anyone does it. It really helps you see where your zone of genius is. And it's a framework that is truly universal, because the founding father of positive psychology, Martin Seligman, and his colleague Christopher Peterson actually created this framework based on an analysis of all world religions and philosophies. And that's what makes it truly special, because there's an idea that happiness is only for rich people. Happiness is only a Western concept. And sure, the research has been more developed in Western countries. However, happiness is a human right. The UN recognizes happiness as a human right and has done so since 2012, if I've got the right year. So this is something we need to make accessible, and it's part of our mission. So now we have a library, we have a platform with over 20 topics, with workshops, guest speakers, cheat sheets, action lists, journal prompts, curated lists of books, podcasts, videos, so that you can practically work towards each strength or each topic just a little bit each day. And our new vision is to really try and have more impact. So there are a lot of underserved communities in the world for who have maybe never had access to a psychologist and cannot afford a coach or a psychologist. But again, I want to make the science of happiness accessible to all. So the idea is now to offer programs and workshops to corporates with a 1-for-1 impact model. So for every program that is purchased, we will give a program to an underserved community.
Oh, beautiful.
So actually right now we're in our second week of delivering an 8-week emotional resilience program to 14 girls in Afghanistan.
Oh, wow.
So if you can imagine the challenging situation that they face, where they can't go to school anymore, they can't play outside, they're not even allowed to sing or to speak. This provides some tools for navigating extremely challenging times and building resilience, and also having a forum to express themselves. I mean, imagine if you're not even able to speak just because you're a girl or a woman. So this is something that is really part of our mission. And I think that the 1-for-1 model is a really great way of expanding that.
Thank you. That's very inspirational. How do you connect with or find such projects, like the one you just mentioned with Afghanistan? Because I guess there's language barriers and so on. Do you work with partners for that?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, I should have mentioned them before. We've partnered with the Brave Future NGO, which is based here in Portugal. And these girls actually speak English, and they have Wi-Fi and they have laptops. And we have to remember that there are, of course, not everyone in the world speaks English, has Wi-Fi, has a laptop, but there are a lot of people who do. And if there's a way to reach them, they can then teach their community.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's a ripple effect. And it would be a shame to miss out on that opportunity to have impact.
As you said, you like to finish what you start, and it makes me so hopeful to know that you're on this journey. And of course, all my fingers crossed, and all the best for the pitch tonight.
Thank you.
Would be very curious to hear how that went. Yeah, again, with the theme of finishing what you started, there's this book, right, that you wrote. And I think that was the first time you wrote a book. How
a lot
was
of
that
firsts.
Journey? Yes, many firsts.
Yeah, many firsts. The first time writing a book for me. It's interesting because when I was little, I always wanted to write. I loved books. And for some reason, I didn't even consider the idea of writing a book. It was only when, before embarking on this journey to dance around the world, I met with a writer, one of the original Lonely Planet writers, who said to me, this project would make a great book.
Oh, yeah.
I said, oh, really? He was like, you should write a book, just casually. And it was one of those moments where you've got the mirror in front of you and the person is mirroring back to you what you actually want. And I said to him, a book? Me? No, I can't. I'm not going to write a book. He's like, well, do you write? I was like, well, actually, most of my work is writing as a researcher. I write policy reports and policy briefs and articles. So, yeah, I don't know. And he's like, you can write a book. That was literally the sentence. So as I embarked on this journey, I started taking a lot of notes, actually on the Notes app on my phone. And I took a lot of videos. I took a lot of photos. I have a very visual memory. And the entire process, I'm not going to lie, took 4 years. So what are the characteristics of that? Time, effort, patience, perseverance, a lot of uncomfortable emotions, but also having that resilience to see something through. In a way, it was kind of the journey of learning to dance for the first time.
Yeah.
So yeah, over those 4 years, I wrote the first draft. I got an agent. I actually signed my book deal the week before COVID started.
Oh, wow.
But on the bright side, the whole editing process was during lockdown. So I was really locked down and editing away. And Finding Rhythm was published in March 2021. And actually, I'm very excited to share that it's being republished as paperback.
Wow.
In April 2025. And this time we don't have a lockdown, so we'll be able to celebrate it properly.
Wow, that's so nice to hear. Congratulations. And I saw where you were getting towards, like all these components that lead to this happy, fulfilled life. Writing a book. And I think that's also a challenge for many to really finish it, right? But you got yourself through. Do you think your happiness mindset, or just that you're so aware of what it takes to create a happy life, also keeps you kind of on track with that?
You mean with finishing tasks?
Yeah,
or?
So that you understand what it takes, all this patience and resilience, so that you do not get discouraged so easily, maybe?
Actually, yes, I'd never even thought about that. But when I look back I would categorize everything as a dream. It was my dream to work at the UN. It was my dream to go and learn how to dance around the world. It was a dream to publish a book. The first dream to get my dream job at the UN took 7 years. The journey dancing took a year, but it got me to beginner level in a lot of dance styles, but I'm still working my way through intermediate about 8 years later.
Yeah.
And I see this as a lifelong journey. What all these dreams have in common is they took a lot of perseverance, a lot of belief, a lot of patience. I'm not saying that I finish absolutely everything that I want to do, but the things that are really, when we really have a dream in our heart, we just have to take that first step.
Yeah.
It's the hardest part.
Yeah.
And then it's just consistent effort and practice and perseverance, and also being passionate about it. I think that's key.
And I think what comes to my mind here also is that courage, right? That first step you just mentioned, it's the hardest. And courage has the Latin word, or comes from, at its root, at the root of the word is the Latin word cor, which means heart, right?
Yes.
So for me, since I understood that, I mean, whenever I'm in a moment where it takes courage for me to take that next step or take that first step, I just tell myself, okay, it takes courage, but it's because your heart is in it somehow. So that's why it's necessary, right? That's
the core element is that it comes from the heart. When we make these decisions from the heart, it's so powerful. What makes me very sad is many people not living the life that they truly want, as in they're living someone else's life. They're not living a life that's authentic, based on their values, on their beliefs. And actually, this is something that in the book, The Top Regrets of the Dying, the number one regret is I wish I had lived a life that was true to myself. And that's something that I really strive for and advocate for, because I believe everyone deserves to live a life that is true to themselves.
Yeah. And how natural is that for you? I mean, in the meantime, or has it always felt natural? Did you ever feel like you were not really true, if you remember?
From what my mom tells me, I was always a bit eccentric, and I was always quite expressive. And I think that I never really fit in a box. Already growing up in the UK with French as my first language, I always knew I was different and that I was going to do things a little bit differently. I would say that having said that, when it came to my teenage years, and I think that many people will resonate with this, which is basically the preparation for university and choosing what job you're going to do. Yeah. A lot of us went into I want a really good career. I'm going to become a doctor or a lawyer. Like for me, it was, I'm going to work for the UN. I'm going to put in all this effort. I'm going to be a policy analyst. Of course, little me had the dream of being a writer. And just wanted to dance and drive her ballet teacher crazy by doing everything differently. But then teenage me was like, no, I have to take life seriously. I want a really well-paying job so that I can build for a future and all that. I would say that I went to fulfill these societal roles and expectations in some ways. For instance, okay, now that once I have my job at the UN, I will finally be worthy because I would have reached my goal and my dream. And the point is, I told myself I'm going to work for the UN by the time I'm 30. I joined at 27, I quit at 30.
Wow. How
because sometimes once your dream comes true, you realize, I mean, it was a dream for, I think it was 4 years. It was a dream until a certain point. And right now I work as a consultant for the UN, which is much better because it gives me that space to be myself. I know I had to, and again, I think people will resonate with this. I had to let go of the attachment to the job title. I had to find my worthiness and sense of self outside of my job. It didn't come from my accomplishments. It came from my values, from my interests. It's the typical question of, what do you want people to say about you at your funeral? What do you want on your gravestone? You don't want, I worked so hard, they earned this much money. No, you want people to remind you, to remember you as being kind or having certain hobbies.
Yeah, very, very true. Now, saying, I mean, maybe typically a bit, but your lifestyle is different from, let's say, larger parts of the majority of society in the places where we live, right? In the, let's say, Western capitalist world. How is that for you? I mean, do you feel like you have to explain how you live a lot, or is it usually in where you live and amongst your friends, it's very common? Or is that something that that people are maybe fascinated by and would like you to help them bring to their own lives as well, if they feel they're more like living according to society standards? But then someone like you comes, right? You're a bit like exotic, maybe to some, or you don't really feel like that.
I think I try to spread my message as much as possible, like we are right now, to encourage people to take first steps and to live life according to their values. I understand that it's easier for some than for others. In my case, it's something that I'm actively practicing now for many years. But it all comes down to it's not an innate quality that I have. It's all effort, time, practice. Again, back to the same things.
We're learning a lesson here.
I think changing people's mindset is something that I hope I can contribute to by sharing my story, and by emphasizing the fact that many people think society in general has the wrong notion of what happiness is. And for instance, there's a great course on happiness by Laurie Santos at Yale. Actually, this is, I think, the most popular course in Coursera. Many people took it during COVID, including myself. And she does this really great, she outlines like, these are the things that people think will make them happy. Getting married, buying a car, material things. And she explains all the science behind it, that actually memories, savoring memories, connections, relationships. This is, I mean, every single study on happiness has shown that the number one factor is found in our relationships.
Yeah. Now that makes me think of you traveling the world, right? You mentioned the UK where you grew up, but then there's obviously the French part in you as well. You live in Portugal now. You have traveled to all these places where you learned to dance. You lived in Bangkok. You mentioned that. Connecting in places where you are first a foreigner or not local. How do you navigate that?
So to give you an idea, the first country that I moved to was Mongolia. Which
really?
I have fun saying it every time, because sometimes even this was in 2010.
I mean, not that you should move to Mongolia. It's more that I wouldn't have expected that. Yeah. Okay.
So I really wanted field experience. I didn't want to just study policy from a nice office in London. So I applied to an organization called VSO, which is kind of like the British equivalent of the Peace Corps, except that you don't teach or provide a service. You are meant to build the capacity of other people in the same profession. My project was a bit different because as a policy researcher, they wanted a researcher to analyze the education system and education programs. Something really beautiful that I have found is, of course, it's very uncomfortable. I'm getting back to the discomfort. to be in a completely new culture. For me, I was lucky to have traveled a lot as a child. My mom would take me out of school to take me on her business trips, which was a really great idea because I learned much more. So I was used to, from the age of 8, going to countries like Morocco or Romania and learning about their history and their culture and customs. I remember as a child actually in Morocco, spending time with the cook in the house, because these were colleagues of my mum's, and learning how to make Moroccan bread and going with her to the oven and trying to carry it on my head. And I wanted to be just like her. And actually, I think that's what made me naturally curious to want to learn from others. So along this whole dance journey, I was always the student. I never imposed myself as an expert on anyone. I was there to learn from their culture, about their dances. So when they lent me their costumes, you know, people say, isn't that cultural appropriation? I'm like, no, they invited me and they were so happy that a foreigner took the time to learn their national dance. Yeah. And it was something that it was guided and facilitated by them. I wasn't the one to impose that. And similarly in Mongolia, I mean, obviously this was a huge culture shock, and this is 2010, so it was a different stage in the country's development. But there is a nomadic culture. There's a different way of life. The language sounds like nothing you've heard before. And so the thing that I find the most beautiful is that we're all human in the end. We all have feelings. We maybe express them in different ways. But the connections that I made really good friends there. And actually, I remember my manager, I would probably still say she was the best manager I ever had.
Wow.
Yeah. Salmon, if you're listening to this, I mean you.
It's very beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. And you led also, and speaking of nomads, you led what we call like digital nomad life, right, for a while. But you decided to settle again in a place. What led to that decision in the end? So after 2 years of being a nomad full time, a digital nomad, not a Mongolian nomad, I really felt I needed a place to root myself. It's interesting because in terms of fulfillment and happiness, too much routine can be lethal to our happiness, but no routine is also lethal. So if we think about our well-being and health, and you want to put some practices in and maybe have friendships that last longer than a month. I mean, I was lucky. Every place I went to, I always managed to dive right in and create community, and usually by going to dance classes and dance events. It makes the world feel smaller, actually. But I really wanted to set some roots, and my criteria for choosing Portugal, well, first of all, it was kind of an accident. I was living in Mexico City for about 9 months before COVID, and I was looking to settle there. With COVID, there were 4 flights back to the UK left, and I didn't have a residency. So I was advised by both embassies, British and French, that it would be better for me to go back. By the time things had gotten better in Europe, it was the peak in Mexico. So I started making a list of places that I'd been to where I knew I felt good. And it's very interesting because the first step was actually pros and cons. And the place that came out top, I was like, no, but I don't want to. So I thought, well, okay, how do I feel in each of these places? And I always felt really good in Lisbon. There was something about the like sense of peace or kind of calm, and I don't know if it's the river or the light. There's also this beautiful light in Lisbon. And so at the time I was just looking at flights at all of these destinations and saw one that was a really good deal for Lisbon and just booked the flight. And within a week I found an apartment. Very nice. Some things are just meant to be, right?
Absolutely.
When we're in the flow. And I hope that will happen to you or for you also now that you're going to the pitch. That, can't wait to hear how that went. And is there anything that comes to your mind, maybe as a closing word, like in terms of first times that you would like to create? I mean, obviously there's the pitch, but beyond that, any first time project step for you that's coming up that you can't wait for to happen?
I mean, if it's the first time, it hasn't happened yet.
No, it hasn't happened yet.
So in that case, I would probably say something that I would really like to explore as the next first would be a film adaptation of Finding Rhythm.
Oh, beautiful.
And something that I want to do to start that is maybe not in the traditional sense. It's actually going back to all the footage. I have video footage of everything in the book. So I want to start creating mini stories.
Yes.
Narrating the story, but also having the content. Because it's a book that's full of stories of many people, of many cultures, of many countries, and with so many different perspectives on happiness as well. So I feel they need to be kind of brought to life in a more visual way.
And many firsts in there for sure as well.
Absolutely.
Right? Keep us posted on that. As we know, you finish what you start. Let's take this as a start to that film project. I can't wait to see it as part of this world. Thank you so much for being here today, Aliénor.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, everyone. If you liked today's episode, it would mean the world to us. If you like it, share it with friends, family, or anyone who could need a boost in courage. Also, we would like to know from you, what are your reflections, your passions, your dreams? Let us know in the comments, and let's keep creating healthy, powerful firsts together. I'll see you next first time. Until then, all my love and courage to you. Ciao.